we played a little bit of doctor, which I hate to do because it was in the moment. And I said that it looked to me to be a shoulder injury, in particular, Nico Iamaleava's left shoulder when he went down against Mississippi State. He fell on that shoulder before. The shoulder is an issue. However, I have been led to believe, and Jimmy Himes reported on Sunday Sports Sound Off, that Nico Iamaleava could well have suffered a concussion. I'm not reporting that as 100% fact. If I could have run it down yesterday when I worked the phones all day, I would tell you that right now. But I do believe, I'm not reporting, but I believe that a concussion is part of the equation in this. Now, a couple things to unpack here. If it's a sore left shoulder and not a broken collarbone and not dislocated and not a separated collarbone, but just sore, then he's going to play on Saturday, right, Caleb?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. When you bring in the word concussion, and we're not as sensitive to that as we were when the Will Smith movie came out, concussion, but we're still pretty sensitive to that. And it's something that could linger throughout the week. So, Caleb, that is somewhat disconcerting, more so than just a shoulder injury. I believe we can agree on that, correct?
Correct.
So, a concussion could be anywhere from he could be cleared on Tuesday to a concussion could be, he could be out 3 or 4 weeks if he shows signs of that. I do want to emphasize again, we're not, in my opinion, as overly sensitive as we were for a time when the whole Will Smith movie came out. Listen, we knew there were concussions. The lion's share of players did have a good life after football, but certainly concussions were going to be an issue. And let me go ahead and tell you, I'm going to give them a soapbox for a second. They can do all the helmet stuff they want. That doesn't, the concussion, the new helmets, they protect the skull. They don't protect the head because it's the ricochet effect. So with Nico Iamaleava, if there is a concussion lingering, then I don't 100% believe what Josh Heupel has said and may even say in his press conference today, that everything's fine. It's just precautionary. I think he's hoping that would be the case. I think it was wise to pull him out of the game for the second half against Mississippi State. But we have seen before that Josh Heupel has been overly optimistic in the case of Lance Hurd making the Arkansas game. Cooper Mays last year playing in the Florida game. He's been overly optimistic, perhaps gamesmanship, to say this guy's going to play. So, Caleb, while I am, and I want to be real clear to everybody on the message board, I 80% think he's going to play. Okay, 80%, maybe even 90. I don't think it's cut and dry until we get to midweek and we learn some more news. So, Caleb, I just want you to comment on that, and then I want to get into the discussion. Can Tennessee possibly beat Georgia with a Gaston Moore if that were the case? Don't overreact on the message board, okay? But if that were the case, I don't think it's the end of the world because of the way Tennessee's built. But first, Caleb, your thoughts on concussion. When you and I talked late last night setting up the show in our 3:45 a.m. production meeting, you were kind of like, oh, that changes things, doesn't it?
Well, again, concussions are, you're right. It's my understanding with concussions and the way they have been treated for health purposes, even in the NFL level, it's more you just have to be out for that game. But don't concussions go away within a couple of days?
Yes.
Like, I'm not like they're like you're back to normal after a couple of days, aren't you?
Yes. So I mean, there is a possibility it could uncover something else and it could be an ongoing issue and he could keep showing signs. I just want to say that I don't think it's lock, stock, and barrel. No question. The discussion is over. He plays Saturday against Kentucky. I 80% believe he'll play.
Georgia.
I 80% believe he'll play. Don't get me wrong. but I think there are more developments and more tests that have to go on. I do not think the shoulder, in any sense of what I've heard, would keep him out of Saturday's game against Georgia. But the concussion also leads us to this, and that is, Caleb, you can't necessarily play through a concussion like Dylan Sampson played through a sore ankle that probably numbed up, because if you've ever sprained your ankle, they go numb pretty quick. I know firsthand. But you can play through a lot of injuries. The training staff might tell you you're not allowed to play through a concussion. So your thoughts on that, Caleb? 30 seconds from Banks and Jones. Why Banks and Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. Banks. And Adam points out a concussion is a bruised brain. It has to heal like a bruise, and it can get very serious when re-injured. Swing Sculptor said, is the line 9 because Nico is hurt? Well, I will tell you, I think that yes, that's why the line is at 9 or 10, because I was told it would be at 7 or 7.5 by our gambling expert, pardon me, Tyler Wyatt, last week before we knew of the Nico injury. So now there are some people that have taken this one step further and on social media said brain bleed. I don't have any reason to believe that's the case. Nobody I talked to all day Sunday led me to believe any sort of brain bleed. I mean, for goodness sake, I feel like we go over the top. And I don't want to go over the top, Caleb, and I hope I'm not. I'm just telling you what I have been told, that there is real concern about a concussion. Now, they wouldn't have necessarily known the full results of that during or after the game. So it leads me to two questions. Number one, could Tennessee beat Georgia with Gaston Moore?
What's the other question?
Well, I'll get to that, but
okay. Well, okay. So I wanted to address the injury again a little bit, and then I'll get to that. But yes, with the concussion, with Nico, concussions, you're right. You don't want to risk re-injuring him. But the difference between that and, like you said, playing on a sprained ankle, there's a stress fracture that could come involved with like too many reps. I don't think there's a stress fracture with concussions. I don't think there's the equivalent of that. Maybe I'm wrong. You guys can tell me. But I feel like if you have a concussion and your brain and you fully heal, I don't feel like you've done some sort of damage to your brain that it increases the risk of another concussion down the road. If you wait till you're fully healed.
I think I could not to make this sound like a pun, gray matter, but I think that's a little bit of a gray area. I think Tua Tagovailoa, for instance, is more likely to have a concussion than the average dude. Because
I don't think Tua, but not because he's had previous concussions. I just think because of the way his body's built. I don't think it's because of his concussions in the past. I think it's because of just the way. Put it this way, I mean, a hangover is actually a mild concussion. We've all been hungover pretty badly. I've been hungover a few times. You get hungover one time, you're not more light. That doesn't make you more likely to get hungover the next time you drink. You're just somebody who may get hungover a lot.
Okay. I think maybe that's oversimplifying a little bit. What I would say to this is if you come back too quickly, you're more likely to get concussed. And I think that I've always been led to believe that the more concussions you have, the more likely you are to have one. But I've only had a couple, so I'm not sure.
Okay, well, we'll have to kind of see how that goes. Now, as far as this week, Gaston Moore versus Nico versus Georgia, I set up the poll question in a very funny way, Dave, which is, do Vols have to have Nico Iamaleava to beat Georgia on Saturday? And the answer, yes. No, Gaston Moore is better than Carson Beck. Given the way Carson Beck has played recently, what do you think? Is it possible to say that not that Gaston Moore is good, but that Carson Beck is really, really bad?
Yeah, I said before the season, I got made fun of on a TV show that I do in Knoxville. I said by the time that Tennessee and Georgia play, Nico will be the better of the two quarterbacks. And I was laughed off the stage, made fun of the following week when Nico had one of his off games. I guess it was against either Oklahoma or Arkansas. People brought it up, wanted to remind me, you said that he's going to be better than Carson Beck. No, I didn't say he was going to be better than Carson Beck immediately, but I said by the time they played. And I'll stand by that. 100% healthy Carson Beck is better right now than Nico is better right now than Carson Beck.
But what about Gaston Moore versus Carson Beck?
So the Gaston Moore question is interesting. If this were 2022, you might as well not even go down to Athens, because that team had to have elite quarterback play in order to win, correct?
Correct.
This team is built different. Elite defense, can run the football. Absolutely no question in my mind that Tennessee could win with Gaston Moore if they have a week to prepare him. I think the scary thing for Tennessee is if they're unsure about Nico, how do you handle first team reps? Because I don't think that you can straddle the fence, so to speak, Caleb. I think you've got to go all in. Would you agree with that? You've either got to say on a Monday, I'm getting Gaston Moore ready, or Nico's fine. Let's just roll.
Well, you at the very least have to decide that on a Monday.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to tell anybody. And Dave, let's be honest, you and I both know there's a 100% chance that Josh Heupel does not tell us anything if he's going with Gaston Moore this week.
Yes.
We're not going to know that until the day of. Something's going to come out that, Gaston Moore is going to start against Georgia, and then we didn't know anything about it. That's how Josh Heupel's going to play that. I will say that I'm kind of with you, and it's crazy to think about, but we talked about this last week, Dave. If you guys have looked at the way Georgia's played recently, I think Tennessee could beat Georgia playing the way they did against Miami in 2003, where it's play very careful football and just wait for Georgia to implode and make mistakes, because they keep making mistakes.
Yeah, Carson Beck is not a leader. He's not a guy that people have rallied around. I knew that in September. I've made two great calls since we've been doing this show together, Caleb. One, that Michigan in September was the best team in the nation last year. Remember I said that?
You did, and you said it. You just said based on eye test, they just look head and shoulders.
And I will go ahead and tell you that I don't think Carson Beck has a very good arm. I think now he's turning the ball over. I think Tennessee, it would be close to a wash if Gaston Moore was down there. And that sounds insane, but it would be close to a wash because I think they would put Gaston Moore in a position not to turn the ball over. And that would be the key. His most important stat would just don't turn it over. Let the defense set up a score. Let the running game control the clock. Shorten the game. That's all well and good. Take the crowd out of the game by shortening the game. Now, I think Nico's going to play, so I think Tennessee's fine in that regard. I want to be real clear on that. And I think Nico will play, and they'll have an advantage at the quarterback position. Now, the other question that's going to make some of you mad, but that's what we do here, okay? We're not the kiss-ups that you can find at other places. And we can make this a poll question. Do you trust Josh Heupel when he says everything's fine with Nico Iamaleava? Because I got to be honest with you. I understand the gamesmanship, and I don't want to call it lying, but I do not trust him when he says that everything's fine right after the game before he's undergone more testing with Nico. Because surely if they thought it was a concussion, if they thought it was a shoulder, either or, there's an MRI involved or a brain scan or something, okay? So I don't believe right after the game, he knew that everything was going to be fine for Saturday. Maybe he knew that it was precautionary reasons and he could have run out there and play. But based off what we saw Cooper and Lance Hurd go through, I do not believe Josh Heupel at all. And I'm not trying to attack his morality, or I'm not trying to attack his character. But Caleb, it's partly gamesmanship. We have seen it before. So how much do you trust Josh Heupel when it comes to saying guy X, I don't care who it is going to play?
Yeah, no, I don't trust him at all on this. I mean, Josh Heupel is not going to tell us the truth, and he wouldn't want to tell anybody the truth because I'm not the biggest fan of gamesmanship. I think it's overrated, but it is kind of a factor when it comes to the quarterback. Is that fair to say?
If you're ever going to lie, this one would be a big one because you would want Georgia getting ready for Nico the whole week. And you would want to roll Gaston Moore out there, kind of like they did with James Banks. I can't remember the year,
Yeah, they didn't tell anybody that Casey wasn't starting until that Saturday.
I had no idea. I was like, look, James Banks is out there running around like a crazy man. I did not know that. So that's what you would want. And if there's ever the right time to lie, and I'm a Christian person, I believe in not lying. I actually detest lying as much as any sin out there. But if there was ever a time to lie, this is the time to lie, right?
Yeah. There is absolutely no way you could. There's no way you should tell the truth. And I would tell Josh. I mean, honestly, as a media member, I could not get upset with Josh Heupel for not telling the truth. You don't want it out there.
This is right.
You know, which is why, again, this is what's so silly and stupid about the injury report requirements. Of course, he's going to put Nico Iamaleava as questionable on Wednesday. He could probably even put him as probable. What are they going to do? You know, what's the SEC going to do? Say, oh, did you lie? Like, well, you know, we thought he could go on Wednesday. And then, you know, Saturday came and he just didn't heal the way we thought. Like, this is like, why do they do this, Dave? You can easily lie on these injury reports.
Yeah. Yeah. Derek says when he walked off after that run, he had his head hung low. It didn't look like a shoulder sag, man. It's a concussion. Yeah. I'm afraid.
And this is a great.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's the case. And if that's the case, it opens up a whole nother can of worms than a bruised shoulder.
And this is a great point by Adam. The general himself, do we think he would have disclosed any injury information voluntarily? Robert Neal as a military guy.
No, he probably would have just used artillery against the Bulldogs. he would have had some M60s up on the hill in that area that they don't have closed off and just use that.
He did actually design. He's the first one to actually design using the press box to call plays because he actually designed the phone to the press box because he wanted he wanted somebody to see the field from the aerial level, which, by the way, biggest red flag to me always with Randy Sanders and John Chavis was that they coach from the sidelines. How are you going to be a good coordinator when you're not even seeing the whole field?
Chavis was in the press box.
He not later in his career. He was later in his career. He would be on the sidelines.
Okay, yeah, I think that's difficult to do. I know you like to look guys in the eyes and see if they're tough and all that stuff, but that's stupid.